Hey guys, wanted to greet you here. This is the last week, you can believe it, of the term, and so we are wrapping it up. I had you look at some videos yesterday of instruments, and so I wanted to share a little bit about that as far as some experience I've had with different instruments. Now, I know I've showed you piano and guitar. I think I've played guitar for you guys, yeah. And but I actually started on drums, and that's when I first started learning music myself as far as playing an instrument. And my first transition from drums was to a bass guitar. Bass is a rhythm, keeps a beat as well as plays notes. So it was an easy transition to go from that to learning bass, and then that took me into guitar. And then after playing guitar for several years is when I started taking up piano. Um, Instruments, there's so many I would like to learn. There's some that you almost um, have to read music as far as, you see them in band settings, or, maybe in high school, and a lot of you guys maybe played those kind of instruments. Some of the woodwinds they talked about yesterday, and even percussion. I played percussion in a band for a year, and played all different kinds. Played the timpani drums, played the chimes, the triangle. Most of those you just had to keep the beat with it and know how to read music with the beats and not necessarily the notes. Now, chimes I did, and so I learned a piece from kind of memory where to hit the chimes at. That was for a graduation. But there's all different kinds of instruments. That's why I wanted to show you the one too that had all the just weird, and there's so many. And one experience that I had with instruments was I was able to go to the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix, Arizona. My dad and I went to that, and it was amazing. They set up floors basically based on countries and areas, and so Europe, as far as all the countries there in Europe, and they had all different kinds of instruments from those places, and so I was able to just see all different kinds, and they showed them played. They had them, a lot of them they had on display that you could look at. Some were homemade, some were, people make them mass wise and sell them, and so that was an interesting thing for me to see, that there's just so many different instruments and the ways people play them. A lot of them have similarities. A lot of them, maybe like a guitar, can translate to many different kind of instruments people play. The banjo, mandolin, and a lot of them use the same chords. One funny thing, like the mandolin uses the same chording, like you put your hands in the same spot. It's just a different chord on the mandolin than it is for the guitar. So just lots of interesting material. And obviously, this class, we're just touching the basics of just getting exposed to that. So that's where you can take this class and then go further and start to do some research on your own. And maybe there's an instrument that you've always been interested in, and you can find people playing that, how to play it. Um, but they had all these different kinds, and then they also had on display, instruments that had been famous. I know one was a drum set from a song from an old 60s hit that I recognized, and I was like, that's the drum set that they played for that song. They had some of Elvis's, um, instruments. They had some of Johnny Cash. They had Roy Orbison. They had a whole bunch of stuff from him. So it was just neat to see a whole bunch of different things like that as well, because it was kind of history. And so that was one experience I got to have. Another thing I got to do, and this is not just to talk about me, but it's to show that there's the music world out there has a lot to offer, and it has a lot that you can learn about. That's the word I want to use, maybe not offer, but that there's so many things that you can learn about, and I'm constantly learning. So that's not something that just stops after this class. I had an opportunity. My dad got to record a CD with some of his friends and people that he grew up playing music with, and one of his buddies became a musician for Dolly Parton, and so they wanted to put together a Southern gospel album, and then later they did a bluegrass gospel album, and Dolly Parton actually sang on it. So I have a CD with my dad singing, with Dolly Parton singing. Now they didn't meet. That's how a lot of those recordings go. You lay down your track, you lay down what you do, and then the other musician comes in. But they recorded at Ricky Skaggs' studio, and I got to go, the first CD that they made, and I got to go, and just to be in that studio and see all the different instruments, and I got to meet a lot of his band. They played on it. Ricky Skaggs did play on it, but he came in later, so I didn't get to meet him. I did meet him later, though, at a concert. But they played, several different kinds of instruments, and so I got to see the skill up close. A lot of these Nashville musicians, they're the best of the best, and so I got to see how good they were. Some would record a piece. I would think it was perfect, and then they'd go, "No, I want to fix this," and then they'd go back and play it again or play that little section again. And it was neat to get to see the studio too, because they could splice in someone playing, so they wouldn't have to replay the whole song. They would play that little part, and then they could splice it in, and it was just a neat experience. And so, there's all different kinds of recordings now with the internet. Now there's so many different ways to learn about these different instruments and see different people play them. Now you don't even, there's people now recording hits that aren't even using studios or using home, equipment with the internet, and they're able to release songs that way. So it's just become much more accessible to everyday people, and to just anybody that, comes up with a song can now try it out and see if it works instead of going through that whole studio system. So just a lot of neat things about that. One funny thing for me was the first time I learned about left-handed guitars. You know, when I play guitar, this camera, I don't know which way it's showing, but my left hand, I'm right-handed, so my right hand strums, my left hand plays the chords. Well, if you're left-handed, people sometimes learn, the other way. Now, my dad's left-handed, but plays guitar the right-handed way, just because that's what he had to learn on. He also golfs that way. I mean, he had to learn some things just because that's all there was. But Third Day was a band that we grew up listening to, my buddies and I, and we played a concert that opened up for a band. Their name was, I think, Lightheaded. Anyway, we played for them, or we opened up for them, and I was mainly playing drums at the time, and so we got to meet them and talk to them for a while. And it was about 5 or 6 months later, they opened up for Third Day, and so their family called us. Anyway, we got to go, and during the concert, I'm singing the songs. I knew all, their songs, and I'm singing, and I'm not a big singer, so I would rather play or do an instrument. Anyway, the lead singer of Third Day, Mac Powell, he looked down at our crew, and of course, he knew the family that we were with, and he's singing a song. He's like, "Who wants to sing with me?" And the family was like pointing at me because they knew I knew all the words. So he comes down, and he puts the mic in my face, and I'm like, "I'll play." And I'm looking, and I noticed his guitar was turned around the other way. Not that he was going to let me anyway, I don't think, but I was like, wait a minute, I don't think I could play that because it's turned around the other way. So, that was, one thing I learned, just where I was like, whoa, that guitar is turned around backwards. Another thing I learned on an instrument was a bass guitar. I was playing at a church. We were playing, the youth got to play for the main service, and it was, I wasn't used to that equipment. I was used to playing in the youth. So when we come up to play, I started playing the bass, and during the song, I'm like, I sound like I'm out of tune. Like, I don't think I'm hitting the right notes, but I know I am, but it just sounded off. I thought, is this guitar out of tune? And all of a sudden I looked, and that bass had 5 strings. Most bass guitars have 4 strings. That fifth string, some bass players like an extra string to play other notes. I didn't know that was on there, and so I'm playing the wrong string. And so after that first song, I'm like, okay, this string I'm not even going to use. I don't know why it's there. And later I found out that you could have 5 strings. Another thing is a guitar. Now this I did learn early on playing guitar, but there's guitars with, instead of 6 strings, regular guitar that you strum, there's some that have 12 strings. And so it's a fuller sound. Some songs it doesn't sound as good. Some songs it sounds like that's the way it's supposed to sound. So it just depends on the song and what you're playing. And so there was times that I would use a 12 string guitar to play. Tuning those is a nightmare because instead of tuning 6 strings, you got to tune all 12. And so, just lots of neat things to learn, with music, and that those instruments have all different kinds of things to them that, that you can find out, what the sounds that you hear. Whenever I listen to music, I'm always picking out, because I play other instruments, I'm always picking out, well, what instrument was that? And I really, there's a lot of times I'll really listen into the drums and say, okay, what beat are they keeping exactly? What other percussion maybe is there? Are they adding a cymbal? Are they adding a cowbell? I know that's a joke, but are they adding little things to it? And then I'm also paying attention to the piano. Is it one person playing the piano? Is someone on a keyboard? Is there an organ? An organ has more of a sound like this. This is piano, but an organ's going to have. So it's played piano notes wise, but it's got that different sound. So I'm always trying to hear that in music now, because just seeing what makes the song work. And so, I encourage you to learn about certain instruments, the ones that you're interested in, even some that you're not, to see what goes into them. I remember when I played percussion for the band, the percussion always got put to the last. So they'd work with the whole band the whole time, and we just sat around waiting, because most of us had learned the piece pretty quickly. And they would just, do their, music for a long time. And then they say, okay, percussion, join in. And we'd be like, well, now we need instruction. But usually there wasn't enough time at that point. So, percussion was always seemed to be pushed off. And, two, in high school, what that provided for us times to goof off, where it was like, hey, okay, we don't have anything to do, so let's see what this keychain that makes animal noises will do in the middle of the song, kind of thing. So, that was something that I found out about percussion. A lot of people just kind of, oh, it's easy, but really, a percussion drives the band and keeps the tempo, so it's very important to, spend time and make sure our skill was good. So anyway, those are some personal examples of instruments that I have gotten to see. And one other thing was, if guitars very all, there's always a debate which guitar is the best. My dad is a Martin guitar, and I kind of am too, although I also like Taylor guitars. But Martin, their factory is in Pennsylvania, and we didn't know that. And we were there one time, and we're driving, and we saw the sign, Martin Guitar Factory. And of course, we went, we pulled right off. The rest of our day was, off to the side to see what this was about. Anyway, it's where they make the Martin guitars. And so we got to take a tour. They took us around, and they give tours now. Right now, they're not, because of still they're closed. But we went and toured the facility, and they take you around and they show you all these different guitars, and there was famous guitars there as well. But then we were looking, they hand make them, and Martin's handmade, except for two things. They there's some little piece on the neck or the bridge that they have to use a machine for, and then when they buff it at the end, they use a mechanical buffer, but everything else is handmade. And so we're watching that process, and we come to the end, and there was these guitars on a rack, and there was like 5 or 6 of them, and they weren't even finished, kind of, and they weren't for sale, but they were there. And one guy grabs one. He said, "This guitar right here holds up." He says about $125,000. And then he just set it back on the rack with the other 5 or 6 that were worth just as much. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, don't knock that rack over." But it was just kind of shocking to see that. But that was one neat thing I got to see. So if guitars, Martin guitar is a lot of times considered the best, and they hand make them. So that factory there was a neat tour. So if you're ever in Pennsylvania, it's near Philadelphia. It's about an hour outside of Philadelphia, and I believe Nazareth, Pennsylvania was the name of the town. So anyway, that would be a neat thing to see if they're open. So hope you guys finish strong here. your finals, be next week, and I'm gonna post some things the rest of this week here, and so stay on top of your assignments. Make sure they're in by this weekend, and hope you have a good rest of the week. Thanks, guys.